This conference will now be recorded.
Yes. Rich, a quick question for you. I was
Sure.
looking at the video from last week and was looking at the boards and stuff. Do
Yeah.
you often time out your boards without the sound, or are you doing it together?
So that's a good question. So the way I'm kind of structuring the class is to kind of take you through my thought process when I'm editing. So usually what I'm doing is I'm going through and just roughing it out, like the basic shapes of the scenes or the shots, right? So like just kind of like if I don't have the dialogue available, I'm just sort of like almost like setting the dialogue, seeing how long it takes and getting a rough idea just to kind of pace out everything. Sound effects is kind of how I refine everything, which is what we're going to talk about today. But like, yeah, I mean, typically I'm starting off with like, if anything, just some of those efforts, kind of like we did with the Wario boards, where it's just like efforts, and if there's dialogue, like actual lines, I'll drop those in. But I'm just kind of like, for the moments without dialogue, I'm just like kind of getting an idea of like how I might think this is going to play, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah.
it popped up to me because when I was rewatching the video, the intro where you did Wario, where he pops up like Looney Tunes,
Yeah.
with the audio, it was so in rhythm with one another. It was kind of funny that we were doing it without sound. So
Right.
I was curious if you were refining or you just doing it together so that you don't have to do twice as much work.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, part of that is probably just like, I have a pretty good idea, like, the pace I want it to move. So it's like, I have everything kind of falling, for something like that. I know that I want that to be a certain speed that I want to like really pop in. So you just barely see it. It's growing, boom, like that. So, but I will change things like that. I'll change it like, if I go through with the sound effects pass and I'm like, or the music, or whatever, I'm like, man, that doesn't work with the music hit. Then I'll start changing things, But I like to just kind of like, I like my boss always talked about it as like, my boss when I first started talked about it as like clay, right? You're like getting those basic shapes. It's just super like lumpy, and then you're refining it as you go along and just carving things away, taking out time, that kind of, or adding time. So yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we're recording. We have a good number of people here, so I think we'll just start now, and everybody else can jump in whenever they get here. Okay, sound effects. So let's recap last week real quick. So last week we did picture editing, or just kind of talking about basic like introduction to animatic editing, and talked about that kind of variety and timing, how like the rhythm of a scene is in the context of like animation or in movies is not about a syncopated beat like it is in music, but rhythm is about how do these timings communicate the story to us. So this week, sound effects, like whatever reality that your project is taking, so like whatever story or like world that you're building, the sound effects are going to start to ground us in your story, because the way that we choose our sound effects, where we put those sound effects, the rhythm of those sound effects helps us to really feel like we're in that world. So and sound effects for animatic editing is like it's probably one of our most time consuming jobs, because think about like 22-minute episode, and you have to go through and put sound effects through the entire thing within a 3-week span, so probably less than that actually for the first screening. So this is like it's one of my favorite parts, but it's also very tedious. But I think it's going to be cool. I'm going to show some clips just like we did last week. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys. I want to spend some time in Premiere too today, probably a little more than I did last week. But the clips I think are really going to help us to kind of understand a few things. So we got some Kung Fu Panda, we got some John Wick, we got a whole bunch of stuff. So let's just dive in here and take a look. Okay. So this first one's actually kind of an interesting one. This is from a movie called Searching for Bobby Fischer, which sounds really boring, but it was actually a great movie. This is a really interesting scene. Context of the scene is this movie is about a chess prodigy. In the movie, this dad, is knowing his son is a chess prodigy, took his son to sort of like a teacher or a trainer who has told him, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't, the chess prodigies are difficult to work with. That's kind of where we are. Just pay attention to the way that they use the sound effects in this scene, especially on the long shot of Ben Kingsley's face. It's really interesting. Okay.
Come on, Josh.
Just a second.
Okay. So great thing about this, we can see the waveform here of all of the chess piece hits. So the thing that's really great about this, first of all, on this whole shot, Ben Kingsley, he is kind of completely uninterested, or not uninterested, but he's just trying not to get involved. And the sound and the speed of those, now obviously, like, it's a little bit different between animatic editing and this, but the idea is that the sound effects are what's drawing his attention, the sound of the chess pieces, and the speed of those is what lets him know that something special is going on here. So let's look at that again, this part right here. Then we cut in, and this is where we start building the sound effects. And the great thing, one of the things I love about this is that it has a really good rhythm where it starts to build and then it starts to just do time jumps. Instead of showing every move, it just starts going tick, 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 tick like that. So let's watch this. Down, and then this big exaggerated echoey king going down to show that we're dealing with the chess prodigy. This is a big moment, and the rhythm of this scene is trying to like keep up the speed to show us that this kid is good, like he's a savant. And then we have this moment of silence with just the music. We come back to him, silence, just the stairs, and then the final sound effect is Tony Shalhoub. Clunk. So just to kind of get the idea of like the way sound is used, like, because a lot of times it's just as important, like, the sound effects that we're using off screen as we are on screen, the things that are happening off to the side that are drawing characters' attention, all of those things come into play. So I just want to start with that one. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it. Yeah, exactly. So that we had just someone just mentioned that you can see the rhythm of it, in the timeline here with these hits. So you can see how it escalates, and then it gets to this big echoey. You can kind of see how it trails off. Boom. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is this Kung Fu Panda clip. Now, I'm sure most of you have seen Kung Fu Panda. Yeah, okay, yeah, there is a drone. There's a musical drone there, but not complete silence. I just kind of meant if you're like in that space, there would be silence. So this Kung Fu Panda scene, I just want to watch it, and then we're gonna kind of break down because this has a whole bunch of great things in it. Kind of when we're talking about how we balance sound effects with the voices and also with music. So music's gonna come next week, but I think this is a good place to start with it. So let's take a look at this.
After you, Panda.
Just like that? No sit-ups? No 10-mile hike?
I vowed to train you, and you have been trained. You are free to eat. Enjoy.
Hey!
I said you are free to eat. Have a dumpling.
Hey!
You are free to eat.
Am I?
Are you?
Okay, so great scene, super well edited. I mean, I guarantee you though that the sound effects change when they started putting in sound effects. It changed the way that they time the scene because there's so much going on here. So first of all, let's just go to this bit right here. So he says,
To eat.
"You are free to eat," and Poe, after all the training they've been through, is kind of like, "I don't believe you." So he does this thing. Okay, let's now just listen to that without the video. So I'm going to turn off the video and just listen to the timing of the sound effects. Okay, so we hear that rhythm. So it's doom, ding. We kind of, even without watching it, can kind of sense that Poe is like, that whoever this character is kind of like nervously grabbing at something. So, for instance, I think that if we wanted to ruin that, let's say that we just take these sound effects, I cut them out, and we just make them super even. So like I think it ruins the intent of what's going on. So see how it's too rushed now. He doesn't have that moment of like waiting for something to kind of go like, waiting for Shifu to make a move or like betray him, which is what's about to happen. So like if you change that pacing, it kind of ruins the moment. So like those sound effects are really helping us hear just as much as we see the timing of that scene or of that moment. So the way it should be, again, boom, wait,
Enjoy.
and then that timing of boom,
Enjoy.
Oh, let's down his guard.
Hey!
So that's the next thing I want to talk about in the scene. The way that you put sound effects, the type of sound effects you're using for your characters really matters. So if you pay attention in this scene, Shifu has very light, airy wishes or swooshes and wishes. So it's like he's because he's a red panda, he's small. Poes are much more bassy. So like when I was on Jurassic, if a dinosaur's tail goes past screen, that thing better have a huge bassy, whooshy in your face sound, right? But what would ruin it is if you had it go, because that kind of takes away from the impact of the fact that this is a giant creature. So one of the things they did well in this scene is that they give the weight, the sound effects are giving weight to our characters and to the animation. So
Hey!
those kind of really fast movements. So the next part I wanted to look at, because it's a really great moment with the sound effects you can kind of
Am I?
is when he goes slow motion and they come back down. Wait, did you hear that? And then, it does that kind of like, you can see the contrast in their weights. So,
Ooh.
yeah. Okay, so just keep in mind whenever you're doing your project, make sure those moments have the right amount of weight with the sound effects you're using. If if a dinosaur is stomping, you know, through a place, it better have earth-shatteringly loud and not, you know, kind of just little taps. So just make sure your characters have that right weight. A lot of these things are going to seem, I think, obvious, but they're things I see all the time that I feel like are done incorrectly, I guess, in animatics, is that people don't really like use sound effects to their full effect, because sound effects can kind of help even the roughest boards. Like, they help you understand what's going on. They help you understand what kind of materials are around, what kind of earth is being stepped on. You know, all those things really matter setting up your world. And kind of like I said, it kind of grounds us in that reality. So the other thing about this scene, I wanted to, or this bit right here, or I'm sorry, let's see, not that part, the slow motion. Yeah, right here. Okay, is listen to the timing of how they time the sound effect of Poe falling, the his effort, and then your ears are more easily offended than your eyes. Yes. So listen to the time of his fall, his like the effort, or like the pain sound, and then Shifu. So. Ouch. See what I'm saying? Like, it's if the sound effect of Shifu putting up his dumpling is conflicting with Poe's ow, it kind of ruins it ruins one of those moments. One of those is going to be overshadowed. So they're finding the right timing to make sure everything is emphasized, right? So Shifu has that final say. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that whenever you're going through these next, this next round of homework, or if you're sharing your work or you're working on something with sound effects, make sure you find the right pacing so that all those important moments are highlighted. So the next part, which is just so great, is when Shifu starts, oh, oops, I already passed it, right here. Okay, so they have this great build up, right, of the okay, and I think this is actually a great moment to talk about how this is actually a great moment where I think the syncopated rhythm actually works. So like, we have this big build up, and then kind of watch these beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, back into it. It's almost like like resting for a beat before we go back into it, right? So if you're thinking musically, so like when those French horns go 1, that's our first beat. So let's count it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's the French horn, Poe going woo, then the music of the choir going whoo, and then back into the music. So rest, back into it, faster, faster. So we have those moments to that we let breathe, and the sound effects are helping that. And it's the balance of the sound effects, the music, and the dialogue that are all, this is what we're doing. This is what we're manipulating as animatic editors. So, and then there's so many moments we talk about. I don't want to spend too much time on any one clip, but I mean, just that last moment of Poe flipping and catching it is great. So, boom, and then this exaggerated sound effect of like the slow coming out of slow motion. That's like this, whoosh of wind. So then he hits the ground, boom, and there's this like whip sound. All of those little like accents, like the whip sounds and all of those things, really help to give life again to, like in real life, if you had chopsticks, flung your heart, as fast as you wanted, put your hand in the air, you would never really hear a whoosh. But those are the things in animation that we want to hear, because it gives life to our story, and it's okay to exaggerate because we're in animation. We're building this world. So cool. Okay, heads up for this next one. Let me just stop for a second. Everybody good? Any questions? Everything making sense? Cool. Okay. Feel free to chime in with anything.
I have a quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when the plates, I couldn't type it fast enough. When the plates are moving around, the
Yeah.
pitch is going up. So are the sound effects people working on that, or do you manipulate the pitch of the sound in order to get that kind of energy moving?
Good question. Yeah, so like in the animatic phase, that's definitely something I would try to do, or at least, I don't know if, yeah, like I would be manipulating those things because like one of the things actually, that's a good point. You reminded me, I wanted to bring that up, is the way that the sound effects sound are important because it's like, with that moment in particular, you want, so like, let's say that I just took, let's see here. Let's say I took 3 of these and then I just kept repeating them to the point that like basically like if you keep, because we only have like a certain sound effects library to work with, I think you want to try to avoid sound effects that sound repetitive. So like if I was to answer your question, as an animatic editor, I definitely want to like make sure that I sell it to whoever's watching it, right? So I would manipulate that. Now, down the line, there's a sound effects team that looks at our animatic, sees what we did, and then they kind of do, copyright free sound effects. So like, see how that's the same pace, but your ears are catching like that it sounds repetitive. So that when they're escalating it like that, I think first of all, it helps the intensity. It's kind of like music, and it helps for our ears to not be bored by what we're hearing. So like, that sounds too like melodic. So anyway, that is something that we would be doing. It's
It was kind of like the Bobby Fischer thing, but escalated because like the pacing went up, but also
right.
the pitch went up as
The pitch
well.
went
So
up.
it
Yeah,
actually
right.
escalated
So,
that.
like, cause like what I would do, maybe that's something we can kind of go over when I jump into Premiere with like the boards is like, I would time out the way I want it, and then I put like a pitch filter over it, and then just like raise it, right? Keyframe, animate, raise it. Yeah. So definitely, like whenever I make this, I try to or like whenever I go through an animatic, I try as best as I can to just like make it cinematic, right? Just sell them as much as possible because one of the things we're doing is trying to avoid a million notes. So we're like, like anything I can do to sell them on this thing. Yeah. So like I say, whenever you're working on your own animatics or whatever, go for it. Like do everything you can to make sure that this thing looks, like it's ready. All it needs to be done is animated. Everything else is good. So,
Thank you.
yeah. When it comes to editing for a studio professionally, do animation studios fully their own sound effects or have a license to use a large library of sounds? So like I just jumped over to feature animation, and in feature animation we have a lot of the library that we can use from like old movies, but or from like old DreamWorks movies. Um, but typically they send it to a place that actually like does the sound effects. So like even on Kipo, they would do that. They had a sound team that just, the classic style, microphone, crumpling a bag, all of that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. And then I feel like I struggle picking the right sound effect. Do you develop the sense of an internal audio library as you do it more, sort of like building a visual library as you draw? Yeah, that's one of those things where like you have to start being creative because like every specific, you're not going to find like if you type in like dumpling sound effects, that's not going to pop up. So you have to be like squishing sound effects, right? You have to kind of think about other ways of doing it. If you can't find a car crash sound effect, you look for metal bending, impacts, things crumbling, and combine those together, right? So yeah. Okay, so next clip from John Wick. Again, I don't mean to keep showing violent clips, but this one's got some violence in it. It is, but this is just I think it's a really cool scene to watch just for the sake of sound effects. There are 2 scenes we're gonna watch tonight that have no music, which is kind of why I wanted to show these because it really accentuates the sound effects. So let's check that out. This is from John Wick 3. This is in like a third of a ridiculous knife fight. Okay. Okay, crazy scene. So what I did here was I cut out all of the. Oh, actually, before I go on, I just want to answer Andy's question. Do you have excuse me? Do you have a hierarchy for what things to layer in the rhythm of the scene? So usually, like what I do is I like to go through, get the I get the picture first, and then I like to do dialogue because the dialogue is like our that's how I know how to time out when a character's talking. Get all those acting moments first. Then I like to go in and do sound effects. Music I always do last because like even though things are going to be changing, I want to make sure that at the end the music is I can kind of time or find music that times to what I've already edited. But we'll go into this in next week, but like music definitely plays a part in like changing your timing as well. And I'll go into that. But yeah, I usually like my preferred thing is boards or shots first, dialogue, sound effects, music. So what I did with this one was I cut out all of the
There's also a
yeah.
question from Tyler, a little bit higher.
Oh, okay. Are the little musical stings something you do in the sound effects stage, or are they considered part of the music? So there's kind of both. Like, stingers, like, are sort of a mixture between like music and sound effects. They're like punches and things like that. Like whenever you watch like a Christopher Nolan movie, anytime there's that like sound, that's a stinger. And like I do that to like, if I need to accentuate a certain moment, then I definitely will like use that as a sound effect.
Yeah, and then specifically in the Kung Fu Panda one where there was like the like between when they would take a pause.
Yeah, so this part right here. Like that moment?
Even earlier there were like tiny ones where it would be like they would make eye contact and there would be like a little.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. Well, it depends because like in Kung Fu Panda, I know that they would use like gong noises a lot to accentuate things. Yeah, where's that moment that right before they let's see here. Yeah, there's that one moment where they right there. Yeah, like some of it just depends. Part of it's the score, part of it is, like they might use like a gong noise to accentuate something, and it's one of those things, it's like it's kind of up to you. Like honestly, I'm just kind of giving you like how I would do it. Like if you wanted to do all of that stingers and stuff like that in the music phase, it's totally up to you.
So it's kind of just up to discretion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. So what I did here was I kind of cut out all of the main sound effects and just dropped them down and put them in as orange, just so we can kind of look at the space between things. Now, again, the live action, it's different, right? Because the actors are manipulating the timing. But the director and the editor are still making sure that the space between certain things is working. So I want to look at a couple of different parts here. Let's kind of go forward a little bit to, where's that one part that, okay, yeah, this part right here. So boom, boom. So then there's that moment of like, oh my gosh, he almost just threw a knife into my crotch, and then it goes fast from there. So we're kind of playing with that, the timing of. Yep. And then there's another moment here where he throws a couple of different knives right here. You can kind of see already, like, see the space between these. boom, boom, and then there's a third knife that gets thrown. So boom, boom, ding, and you know that like that this is a like a moment where they definitely added a bunch of sound effects because there's some wild like thumps, thump, thump, a lot of crazy spinning and stuff. So even though this movie is grounded in the real world, there's still some exaggeration, that we want to kind of play with. Like you don't want it to be like, you don't want your sound effects to be so real world that we're not invested or like feeling the intensity of all those moments. So, so yeah. So all of those. So like right there, boom, 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 boom. Yeah. So just to kind of make the point that like, even in live action, we have this like rhythm in our sound effects that keeps the scene alive. We had another question. Is it usually one editor for a whole scene? Yes. This is my first time in feature, so things change where like, things get kind of handed off, and then, but the way it works is that like an assistant sometimes, but typically an associate editor will build a scene and then show it to the editor. The editor makes the final call on those things. But for TV, you have a couple different editors working on you have a couple different editors working on a show, and they all take an episode, and the assistants are helping them build that episode. So it would kind of be like an editor would kind of take a whole sequence, so like that whole sequence right there was probably one person that went through that and just like, sat with the director and went, scrutinized over it for weeks, I'm sure, because that was a pretty complex scene. So yeah. Okay, great. So the next thing is, again, like when we're talking about, we're going back to our question, right, of is this right for the story? I want to show us 2 clips and kind of show how you can sort of, and again, this is going to seem ridiculous and a little bit maybe obvious, but there's things I see all the time that people don't, use sound effects well. So I just want to show 2 clips, and then I'll kind of show you the exercise I did. So just a really quick little thing with SpongeBob.
No more fooling around. I've got to get back to work.
Okay, that's all I want to show. Everybody knows that sound effect of SpongeBob's feet.
Work.
Okay, now let's watch this Batman clip.
You have it, Alfred?
Of course, sir.
Okay, so now let's just ruin that moment.
You have it, Alfred?
Of course, sir.
Okay, it's a ridiculous exercise, but what I wanted to make is that I honestly, you'd be surprised, like I see that a lot where, not to throw anybody under the bus. I mean, DreamWorks is full of incredible editors. I'm just saying, like, maybe like assistants or people like learning the process. You have to make sure that your sound effects are grounded in, the reality of whatever this is. So like that scene with the added effect of like SpongeBob squeak, it almost makes it sound like Batman's walking away after he got water in his shoes or something like that. It totally changes the mood of the scene. So new version much better, yeah. So like, when you have a cartoon show, you can get away with the springs and the boings and all of that kind of stuff. With our Wario boards, we can get away with whenever Wario lifts his eyebrows, a violin pluck, bling, bling. If a character in Batman did that, and I don't know, I mean, Batman's got some cartoony stuff, but like did the bling, bling, it would kind of take us out of it because it's not really the world that they've established. So just make sure that your sound effects taste matches whatever kind of project you're working on. If you're in a super cartoony show like Looney Tunes thing, you can get away with the, all of those wild whirlwind sound effects. But if you're in a show like, even when I was on Kipo, we only, we would do like kind of fun, exaggerated sound effects, but we decided early on that we wanted it to be kind of grounded in the real world, but we would have these kind of like crazy mutant, growing sounds and all that kind of stuff. So just kind of like, that's just like my one piece of advice for that is just to kind of keep your sound effects grounded in the reality of your story. Okay, so one more, man, time goes so fast. I want to show a clip from Treasure Planet. I have to say, Treasure Planet, it's gotten beef in the animation community. I think it's a great movie. I mean, it's maybe a little bit, some of the CG is outdated, but I think it's great. I think it's a really good movie. So I want to watch the scene where we meet Silver for the first time. This is a really cool scene just with sound effects, and I want to kind of talk about how they use it here and how they play with it with the dialogue.
Bring in such fine-looking distinguished gents to grace my humble galley. Had I known, I'd have tucked in my shirt.
Cyborg.
May I introduce Dr. Doppler, the financier of our voyage.
Lovely outfit, Doc.
Well, thank you. Love the eye. This young lad is Jim Hawkins.
Jimbo. Now don't be too put off by this hunk of hardware. Whoa! These gears have been tough getting used to, but they do come in mighty handy from time to time.
Okay, so I love this scene so much. It not only just an animation like marvel, but so first let's look at this part right here. Right here. So again, there's just like a really good use of timing with the sound effects here and the cutting to kind of build this intensity that Jim knows. If you haven't seen the movie, Jim has sort of had a indirect interaction with Silver already, knowing that a cyborg type creature attacked his home. So, so we have this footstep. 1, 2, and then it zooms in. So we have that kind of rhythm of 1, 2, 1, and it kind of has that builds that intensity for a minute so that we can see that Jim recognizes this might be the guy who he has a beef with. So, and then when we go into this part where he's cooking, this is great because the sound effects help accentuate some of the things he's saying. So watch when he starts cooking. Oh, here.
Now don't be too put off by this hunk of hardware.
Don't be too put off by this chunk of hardware, right? It's fun because it's fun, but it's also a little bit menacing because we know that that thing is not just made for cooking. So.
Whoa! These gears have been tough getting used to, but they do come in mighty handy.
They do come in mighty handy, right? 1, 2, 3, right? So we have that rhythm there that's also helping accentuate the like, what's going on, and then he's, come in handy, and he grabs the egg. So we have that kind of rhythm that's keeping the scene alive, and it's helping accentuate some of the dialogue. So again, it's that finding that rhythm to help the dialogue really like hit those moments, and having the sound effects play off of that. So make sure that, another thing is just make sure that when you're, I think I already said it, but like whenever you're playing with the sound effects and the dialogue, make sure that they don't clash with each other, but that they're working together, right? So, and then, okay, so this last clip we want to watch before we dive into the Wario boards and kind of just talk about the sound effects that we're going to use, or that I'm going to use for that. Harry Potter and Order of the Phoenix. This is a really cool scene, and I think one of my favorite uses of sound effects in a movie that I've seen. And it has a couple moments that I just want to watch. And then I have another exercise I did just to kind of show you about, the impact of sound effects. So let's just watch this real quick, and then we'll talk about it.
You. If I'll be dead.
Okay, so I can see in the comments you guys are noticing some of the things I want to talk about, which is great. So, so the first thing was, so like we can see that the sound effects they're using, like the decision that they made for this was that Voldemort plays with fire, Dumbledore with water, right? The offense and the defense kind of thing. Voldemort's moves are aggressive. Dumbledore's are soft and kind of like these little, like, that little, I love that moment where he has the little like whip sound in his, let's see where it's at, right here. Right? Really cool. And it kind of like balances out all of the intensity of what's going on with Voldemort. So one moment, again, when we're talking about balancing our dialogue with our sound effects, so like this moment here is really cool. So Voldemort spits out this fire, turns into a giant snake or dragon or something. So we have this hiss, right? And then it dips, it kind of like, that doesn't dip down, but like there's that one hiss, and then we have that space for Voldemort to laugh, and then it swells back in, but it never goes away, right? Ha 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 ha. Listen to that timing. Then it comes back in. So another example just of like trying to balance those things, because you don't want the snake to be competing with Voldemort. That's a really sinister moment. That's great to show Voldemort thinking he has the upper hand. So then we have this moment we just talked about with the, So, and then we have this really cool moment where right here, when Voldemort tries to make a grab out, they kind of cut it so that Dumbledore kind of takes that as a moment to like, Harry, get out of here. He's trying to save Harry. So watch that moment. Voldemort grabs Harry. And you get that little kind of like skid, like using the force to get, or that forceful move to get Harry back. So then this is the moment that I kind of did an exercise with. So we have this part where Voldemort sucks all of that energy in and then bursts out, right? So he sucks all of it out, like there's no sound in that split second. Then what I did was I took out that split second of quiet and I just kind of kept it. Now it gets the same idea across, but look at how it ruins the impact. Did you catch that? The difference being exactly. It doesn't feel nearly as strong. Like that is Voldemort sucking all the energy out of the room and then exploding it forward, and it causes this glass shattering and all of that. So it's really important the way that, you know, it's important to see that like the way that we time those sound effects, that space that we find is, you know, to have that quiet there is hugely important for how powerful that move feels. It's also like kind of like a climactic moment in the fight. So then the last thing I love is just the timing, you know, just to, again, to kind of prove the point of like the way we hear the timing is the glass shattering. Listen to the punching of the glass shattering. It would feel much too planned and robotic if it was right. It's like the force is kind of the force of that move, just kind of like shattering all these windows at different times and you know. So really cool scene. And yeah, I mean, we're actually going to come back to this and the John Wick and the music one because you'll notice there is no music, and I just want to talk about why that's important too. So all about the contrast for sure. Yes. Punctuating, yes. Okay, that's great. Sharon just said a guest speaker in one of my classes called these moments of silence punctuating moments. I thought that was a great way to put it. Definitely, that's exactly what's happening. Is we're punctuating, like that's our big moment in the scene. So awesome. So we're at 7:47. So I want to dive into the Wario boards for the next few minutes, just to kind of like go through some of these things. So here's our board. So this is what I did for, you know, I went out and timed this with all the kind of I'm following along with the homework with you guys just so we can kind of like be in it together. I want to just go to one moment here, which is when Wario crashes into the 2020. So that's just like a great moment for sound effects. I'm not going to worry about the motorcycle sound. I just want to focus on the impact and kind of what happens after that. So I gave you guys a sound effect folder. And I just kind of went through and got a whole bunch of stuff that I think might be helpful for this. You know, I tried to find some things that were specific to what's going on here. You know, I found some video game and synth kind of sounds to help with that kind of Wario style. Like, if you guys haven't seen I actually need to do this. I need to send some YouTube clips of Wario and Smash Bros. So you just kind of see like the kind of sound effects and the kind of motion. And I mean, even Smash Bros has great timing, even for being a video game where you manipulate the characters. But also WarioWare is great for this kind of thing. WarioWare is like this wacky, if you haven't played it, a really wacky game. It's got a lot of like the kind of music style you might want to look into and the sound effects and all that. So anyway, so just look at here at this explosion here. So the way Miguel did it, obviously, like, you know, you can see all the pieces flying out, right? So we know the motorcycle just exploded. So there needs to be some kind of explosion. It has to be really intense and big and abrupt. And then we also need some kind of energy blast because the way he did this is very video game. So some of the things I did here, let's just kind of play with that. So first thing I want to start with is let's get some sort of, I think I have a car crash sound here. So it's pretty big. You can just kind of pick a spot. That's pretty good. I like that the best because we can hear all of the pieces falling off of the car. So let's kind of play with this. Start with that sound effect. Okay. So I don't want that screech to be too long because that'll sound like he's trying to stop, and I don't want that. I want him to sound like it's kind of an abrupt. There we go. So it works, it communicates, but I think it's not big enough. Also, the sound effects go on a little too long. So what I might do is either bring this, let's see what happens if I bring this in. One thing for you guys using Premiere, and there should be a way to do this in most editing software, these are called rubber bands, these little lines here, where you can adjust the volume, right here, that little line. I use the pen tool by just pushing P, and you can make little marks and then just drag this down. And it's kind of an easy way to drop the volume. Okay, so it's a little abrupt, right? It doesn't have that natural kind of trail off. So what I think I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna take this, kind of cut the end of it a little bit, and then do a little cross dissolve here so that it has a little bit of a, Yeah, there's a little bit more of a tail on it. So that's our impact. What might also be good, because this is kind of cartoony, is to add like a punch sound, like almost like like we have the impact for the car. Let's make an impact for Wario hitting his face on this thing, because we see that too, right here. It's my favorite panel. So let's see here. We have some punches. Yeah, that's great. Nice and big. It has the little whoosh on it. So let's see how that helps. Yeah, we're getting much more of like a boom, a little more of a slap in the face. And then I want to add some kind of like, let's see here. We have an explosion synth. Yeah, okay, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about for that energy blast. So see how we're kind of layering our sound effects to help build, instead of just making this an ordinary car crash, we're in a video game world. Let's try to make it exaggerated and big. So, all right, so now you can't really hear that too well. So let's kind of boost that a little bit, bring this down a tiny bit, and see how that sounds. Okay, good. We have a little more of like a kind of, okay. So let's call that, let's say that that's our, okay. So one of the things I did here is I wanted a sound effect like that coconut hitting, because I think it just kind of matched for this kind of Wario thing. So let's look at what we got there. I think I have impact hollow. Yeah. Dunk. So kind of play with this. So let's see here. He comes down. Now the other thing I want to do here again is like it works to have him just do that. But why don't we add a little bit of a whoosh sound just to kind of have that, because we see him having this motion of down towards the ground, so kind of fast. So let's just take a whoosh here, find a good one. I like how we're implying that Wario's head is hollow. Yeah, totally. That's kind of the idea when you do those in that's why they did that in like old cartoons, it's like thunk. It has that sort of like hollow sound, like there's nothing in there, a moment to kind of humiliate them. Okay, so like this right here. Watch how this kind of, when we put this in, this accentuates this motion a lot more. So I'm going to take out these sound effects just so we can hear this. And we'll take out the impact of the, okay. So you have that kind of like that whoosh bung, so many weird sound effects. Boom, yeah. So then we have him kind of falling on his face. Now, because he's falling on his face, I kind of want like a, sort of like a slapping kind of noise. Let's look at that. Let's see if we have something like that. Not like that, but we want kind of like a, okay, that's not bad. It's not heavy enough though. See, some of these are a little bit too heavy. Yeah, that's a little bit too heavy. Let's see here. Body fall. Okay, so maybe let's take this one, because it has that nice bassy kind of flop on the ground, right? So now it's kind of just like look through like how are these sound effects playing as far as the timing is concerned. So see how we have that kind of like that timing with the audio and the sound effects. So we have boom, boom, and then so right. So we're kind of playing with that. What keys are you using to select the specific sound in the clip? So I'm really just doing, you can just kind of click on it like this, but then you can do control click to kind of, just kind of like, or shift. But although I think shift will do, you can do shift or control to kind of like click through, each sound effect, play with it. And then you can also, I think I can't remember if I mentioned this last week. Shift E is how you disable a clip. So yeah. So, and then he pops up. So we need another whoosh, right? Kind of like probably a really fast one. That's pretty good. I wonder if we can, I kind of like this one, a little bit heavier. So, And then we have a little, like, again, we can probably use a body fall here, a body fall sound effect, just have his feet hitting the ground. I can't remember if yeah, like that. So that kind of, the thing I like about that is that it sounds like 2 feet kind of off balance going to. So where does he hit the ground? Right there. So let's kind of move these in. That's pretty good. I kind of like the idea of having this even a little bit closer. So it's, yeah, right? So we're just kind of playing with some of these things to kind of. Do you sometimes stagger the sound ahead or behind of the moment since the brain registers visual and audio a little bit differently? That's a good question. I actually was just talking about this with my old boss. It's, again, it's kind of one of those things where you don't want it to be too mathematical, right? You want it to be, it's mostly like, if it looks right to you on the screen or the director, that's what's right, right? So it's like, you don't want to be like, well, we're going to register this a little bit sooner, so I'm going to put the, or, you know, I'm going to put the sound before the audio, or before the visual or something like that. I think if you start thinking like that, you kind of get into the rules mentality instead of just like, I'm going to put this where it feels like it looks right. Does that make sense? Like, just where it, like, if it feels right, that's what we always said. Yeah, exactly. I think editing is much more instinct than it is, you know, it's about instinct and taste much more than it is like the science of visual and audio, you know, and audio. So just go with your gut. If it looks right, I think it's right. Yeah. So like sometimes I'll just like for that, for instance, I won't exactly line up like he jumps right here, but I have the whoosh kind of like the peak of the whoosh on the next one, just because I want the sound effects to kind of like to work with the time. So like that. Yeah. And then we have, so boom, scratch, scratch. And then, yeah, so right, so we do that kind of thing, which did I have a scratch sound effect? I think I did. I don't want to do too much of this because I want you guys to play with it and, you know, do your own thing. And then, you know, so like this week, just focus on, you know, again, whether you're doing the homework or not, or whether you're in the homework review or not, just put, you know, build up your sound effects. Those of you who are doing your own projects, you know, your original stuff, it's going to be a little more of a challenge for you because you have to find your sound effects. But if you look at the first email I sent out, first or second, I put a link to where I find sound effects. And again, it's just one of those things. Just be careful whenever you put it out into the world that you're not, you know, violating any copyright things. But I think it's good for just building up sound effects, you know, for like an animatic like this, and just giving credit where credit is due. So this week, the focus is just sound effect editing. Take some of those principles, balance them out with the way that we do, you know, with the way that our characters, you know, with the lines that they're saying, kind of like in that Treasure Planet clip. And then next week, we're going to go into music and how music really helps kind of like another, I have some really cool clips I want to show about how like when to use music, and then also just as importantly, when not to use music. So imagine getting sued over not clearing the copyright in a fart sound effect. Oh my gosh. You know, we've had to use those way more than I thought I would in my career, which is funny. I mean, it's funny how you'll be in like a meeting, like, you know, I'll come home and be like, you know, how was work? Huge fight over a fart sound effect. You know, it's kind of this is the industry we're in. So, any questions tonight? I do want to say that the last week, I do want to kind of give you guys a little bit more of my story. I won't spend too much time with it, but just telling you about how I got into the industry and how I got into editing, and like there's a little bit more than what I kind of mentioned in the first class. So there's definitely more of that, but you feel free to ask questions about anything you want. So anything before we sign off tonight? We got a good. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering how worried or not we should be about like making sounds that fit with the Wario brand versus just like having fun picking sound effects that we like, that we feel like fit.
Yeah, no, okay. Don't worry about so much like about yeah, like you know, I did the kind of video game thing just to match with what Miguel's vision was, but Miguel's not here, so you guys can have free reign to just do what you want with it. My only suggestion is just, you know, make sure that that our eyes, what we're hearing and what we're seeing makes sense together, right? That we don't want anything to clash, so that like the sound effects aren't impact, there isn't a big enough impact, or too little, there, like, that you're not sort of clashing genres, if that makes sense. But I want you to feel free to like take the sound effects that you want to use. If you want to use boings whenever he jumps, that's totally fine. Like, have fun with it. And then, oh, okay, Shichelle's asking about sound license issues. Yeah, so that's one of those things that I'm not 100% clear on, because internally at DreamWorks, we're using Harry Potter scores, and we're using, sound effects from like, music libraries from Warner Brothers and all that kind of stuff, because it's all temporary. I think, don't quote me on this, make sure you look into this before. I think that if you're just using it for animatic purposes and it's temp and you're not making a profit off of it, it's okay. But just always look into it just in case. I was wondering if, sorry, make sure I'm getting all the questions here. I was wondering if boards are usually this level of temporal resolution, if that makes sense, that many frames per action. Oh, okay, yeah. It's not. Like, there would be times when we would, for a first screening, would go in with like the roughest boards ever, where we would just get like basic key poses. And it's funny because, like, not to toot my own horn here, but I feel like my team and I, we would save animatics by sound effects, because we would basically, like, we would know what was going on in that scene. We would try to find the good sound effects to help that just play, at least to have our ears be interested, so we're not just watching a long silent, clip for like whatever, 8 to 10 seconds. So, but usually, like, I think especially for TV, because there's a limited time and schedule, they really board a lot of the stuff, because they want to make sure that the animators, who also don't have a lot of time, know what they're doing. So all those key poses and all that stuff. So I think that I would say that in TV, yes, it's typical that we have this level of boarding where we have all those little like motions of, like, when he falls, he gets like a little squash effect, squash and stretch. So yeah, I think, but I mean, like, in feature, they actually do less, because the animators have a lot more free reign over the timing of a scene. So we kind of work with the time, with the animators and the directors. I don't know if you recorded your coworker farting and used it in your portfolio piece and they found out, they might be mad. That's funny. Okay, what do you think about pairing absurdly ridiculous sounds, like a huge thump for a small object, for comedic effect? Do you ever see that in the industry? Yeah, like if you watch SpongeBob, they do that stuff all the time, where they, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, they'll have like the I think that there's that episode of SpongeBob where Sandy has that really hot sauce and she's gonna pour it on SpongeBob's tongue, and when the drop goes down, it's dropping like a missile. It's like, because it's making a joke out of that moment. So totally, you can, like, have fun with that. Like, it's just about that kind of thing. You wouldn't really fly as much in a more serious setting, right? So like the comedic stuff for SpongeBob, it totally works. Our editor specifically wanted to use license-free music for the animatics things because they put up. Okay, yeah. So I mean, at DreamWorks, it's probably just different per studio and editor. I mean, like, we used tracks from all sorts of things. We did a lot of like stuff from Treasure Planet. We used it from Harry Potter all the time when I was on Puss in Boots. So I mean, it depends. As an editor, when you're working with a director, what's the sort of feedback workflow that you like best or worst? Like how storyboard artists can feel micromanaged. Oh yeah, micromanaging is definitely the worst. It is nice, and I don't want to ever be, always think I have the right to do whatever I want with the animatics, because it's not how it works. The director has the final say. But the best situation I had was, and it's not just because I'm on Rad's classes, but like working with Rad was great, because Rad wanted the show to create it. He didn't want to just be the creator and then everything that he said goes, because I think that he knew that stifles good storytelling. So he wanted everybody to really engage with their part. So the best experience I've had has been, he's going to have the final say, but he's going to listen, and like I'm going to have a really like valid input. You know, my main thing was always, I'm not going to say anything unless I actually have something to say. I'm not going to just give an opinion if I don't have one. So, and then the worst situation, I guess, has been I've had a really good time at DreamWorks, you know, and it's been a blessing to be in such with great people, you know, but it does get irritating when you feel like they just sort of like just do it because I say so, kind of like with your parents, like because I said so. I can't stand that reasoning. Like, I want to know what's your reasoning behind this. If I, you know, can we talk about this? Can we have a dialogue? So whenever that happens, it does get frustrating. Awesome. Then we had another option to find free sound effects. That's super helpful. If you guys have that stuff, drop it in the chat here on the Discord server, or you know, anything like that is great.
Quick question for you, Rich.
Yeah.
How often are you, when you're studying, are you breaking down film the way you're doing in Premiere versus sitting down watching a movie?
That's a good question. Yeah, so like I would do that a lot. Like when I was at work and things were slow, I would do that just to like I wanted to see how like some of these, you know, like I remember my boss and I did that with Ratatouille, because Ratatouille's got some really like it's just a really well-paced movie. And so we would want to look through a scene and so we would cut it up and see like why did they make it this many frames here, you know, like what was the intent in making this faster? Like why do we not need to hold on that? So you know, I mean, I've definitely been doing it more because of this class. Like I had a whole bunch of clips too that I haven't shown you guys because I just don't have time. But I also just like to like, typically what I do is like when I watch a movie, if I'm watching it for the first time, I watch it and enjoy it, have a basic opinion afterwards, and then I want to go back. So like after I saw Spider-Verse, I went back and watched it like 2 more times, and I would just watch the editing. It was kind of exhausting, kind of takes you out of it, but it does help me to like be like, oh, that's really cool how they did that. I would have never thought to do it this way. So mostly I'm just kind of watching, but I do like to go in like when I have a slow time at work and just like open up Premiere, cut up a clip, and I think it really helps me just to see like, you know, and just especially when you're just going back and forth between two cuts, like why did they cut this way? You know, really helps. How long do you typically have on a TV show and feature for the animatic process? And do you usually do them in pieces like scene by scene or the complete episode? So on a TV show, the way it usually works is like you have this sort of 8-week process of getting one episode out, right? And you have sort of 3 going on at the same time in different phases. One of them is about to be sent over for animation. One's in a first animatic stage, one's in a second animatic stage. So you're kind of juggling 3 at the same time, typically. Usually what happens is the assistant editors will build the first thing. Like they'll just go through, do their timing pass on it, and we'll say, do that, put in the dialogue, and then put as many sound effects as you can, and I'm gonna grab it from you when I need it. And then whenever I pick up where they left off, I change some things. And then the director comes in probably after 2 days I have editing it. So we really like spend 2 work days going through like 22-minute animatics. So we're just moving fast, really fast.
I have a couple questions related to that. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, like with the sound editing, do you do all of your sound editing in Premiere? And like within that process, where does that leave like the actual sound people? What do they do?
Yeah, good question. So we do all our sound editing in Premiere. I mean, we use like Audition sometimes just to like add special effects to it and stuff, you know, or I mean, Premiere has a lot of effects you can add to sound. So we do all of our sound effects in there. And then what we do is we send, whenever it gets sent to like the sound studio, we send them stems, right? So like they get the visual, they get the dialogue track, they get the sound effects track, and they get a music track. And they just make sure that like they'll, you know, like they'll sit with Rad, or you know, Rad will be a part of that meeting, and he'll say, or whoever the you know, showrunner is, and you know, they'll make sure that those certain beats are getting hit. So sometimes some things get a little lost in translation, so it doesn't always like come back to us exactly the way we did it. But they do, like everything we do is reference, right? You know, your boards are reference for the final animation. The music is reference for the composer to score everything, and the sound effects are reference for the sound effects team to do their thing on it. So, yeah. cool. And then, okay, yeah, okay, interesting. So how do you illustrate silence with a sound of silence or how? Okay, so moments of silence, it's one thing I didn't talk about is ambient sound, which is like the sort of background sound. And like, I think that knowing where to be silent is huge, both in real life, slow to speak, both in real life and, those moments of like having the right moment to just be calm and to have like a breath there is really big. It's just a matter of like, what is that doing for your scene? So like, if I'm understanding what you're saying, it's like if you want to have a moment where there's just like like that moment in the beginning when we watched Bobby Fischer, there's that bit where like the king goes down and then there's no more sound effects. There's just like that moment, that drone, that single note drone, that kind of intense moment of like, oh my gosh, we just witnessed something big. And then that sound breaks the silence of him knocking over his king, realizing a really good chess player just lost to a kid. So it's just about finding those right moments to accentuate the silence. How long did it take you to go from knowing you wanted to do animatic editing to having a career in it? That's a good question. I mean, maybe I can go into this a little bit in the last week, but like when I graduated I went to University of Michigan and I graduated there in 2014. I really wanted to be an animator at first, and so I did this animated thesis where I did like a 3.5 minute CG animated thing. I did all myself, scored it myself with some friends who I knew play guitar, and by the end of it, I was like, man, I not only am I not very good at animation, like actually animating, but I'm exhausted by it. And when I sat down with my professors, they were like, they said like they were impressed, but they also said the biggest takeaway we had is that this didn't lag. It had really good pacing. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I should take that. And as soon as I got to DreamWorks and sat in the first animatic editing session, I was like, I want to do that. And so I just started like going hardcore to like, hey, bugging animatic editors. Hey, what can I do? Can you give me something to edit? Can I try this? Can I try this? Tell me how, like, what your process is. So from that point, it was about like I guess from the time I graduated, it was about a little under 2 years before I became an animatic editor. So it was actually pretty quick, but it's also because DreamWorks TV was in a boom of like just a lot of content being made and sold to Netflix. So I think I came in at a really good time, but I also tried really hard, and I talked to a lot of people to kind of get to that point. Okay. Let's see, anything else? How different is your past from the assistants? So yeah, I mean, like when I was an assistant, I'll answer it this way. When I was an assistant, I had the great privilege of I worked with these two guys, Ben Chu and Gabe O, just really solid guys in the animation industry, and also very intentional. So like I would give them something. They'd be like, "Hey, Rich, come in here," and I would spend the whole day in the room with them, and we would just talk about like the way I did it. Like, "Hey, why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? Why'd you do this?" And at first, it almost felt like an attack. I was like, what's wrong with it? But it was like they were trying to say, "Do you have a reason for everything you're doing?" So a lot of the time, Ben and Gabe would change it. They change it the way that they wanted to edit it. They do it differently, and so, but they would always explain why. And so it was really helpful for me. So like that assistant editor process should be a learning process where you're learning from the pro editors who've been doing it for a while. Like, here's how I like to do this, and here's why. Here's why we're doing this. I learned significantly more. Not that I didn't learn in school. Like I loved my education, but like I learned significantly more about my chosen field in that first year with those guys than I did in 4 years of college, because you're just in there talking about film, animation. So that's a kind of a dramatic way to say there are differences, but I mean, a lot of times if I just see something I like that they did, I'm like, that's great, and I'll keep it. It just depends on who you're working with. Some people slower to catch up to, or like to kind of, understand the way you want to edit. One of the tricky things about an assistant editor job is that you have to kind of cater to 2 or 3 different editor styles, the way that they want to do things. So that's kind of that can be kind of tricky. But it's always nice whenever you're like, if you understand the way that they want to edit and you're on the same page, it makes their job a lot easier. So, Anything else? Do you usually get the boards as JPEGs or layered files to be able to play around with them more? Almost always as JPEGs. And then if I want to manipulate it, I go into, we have our program called, I think it's called, or let's see, I guess different shows use different things. Like we use Flix, and in that program, you can upload PSD or like something that links to a PSD. So I could open that up and then play with it, export it, and then like, yeah, so it's almost always JPEGs. Okay. Anything else, guys? Let's see. What's your opinion on the likelihood of getting a high-end animation job with no college degree or classes? Is it possible? So this is coming from somebody who has a art degree, you know, and went to college. But when I was at Nickelodeon, I met 2 or 3 people who are artists who did not go to college. And I think that, like, honestly, guys, like Rad's intent with this was to provide this whole thing, you know, all these classes to provide people with a way to like learn the basics of animation, and to, you know, without having to pay skyrocket tuition. So I think it's totally possible. I think at the end of the day, no one's going to turn down someone who's that good. You know? So it's definitely possible. And I think it's just about, you know, I mean, I'm glad that we're all getting to meet. You guys are welcome to follow me on LinkedIn and stuff and send me messages, send me your work, because that always helps, like knowing people in the industry, just to be able to refer you, you know, if your work is good. So why did you want to teach a course on editing? That's a great question. So I think that well, you know, I talked to a couple of people at like DreamWorks, like assistants, and they would say, um, you know, I'm not getting a chance to edit a lot, you know, or I'm not getting, you know, and I want to like learn, I want to have a chance to like actually have something for my reel, learn how to like, you know, edit. And some editors just prefer not to, they kind of have their assistant as like more assistant to the editor than an assistant editor, if that makes sense. So that's a little bit kind of throwing some people in the bus, but that's kind of the, you know, some people work like that. But the main thing is that like animatic editing is sort of a very little known part of the process. Like it's really hard for me to explain it to people who aren't in animation because they don't understand what animatic editing is. People know, you know, post editing because it's kind of, everybody knows kind of like cutting clips together. But this is just a really important part of the process that's behind the scenes. And I thought it'd be fun to just kind of, you know, teach some people how to get interested in this, because it's a really fun part of the process that I think people maybe, you know, don't really realize is like, you know, a huge part of getting an episode together or a movie together.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah. How do you get a job in animatic editing? Do you need to be an assistant or intern first? Yeah, so that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about in our last week, but I'll just briefly touch on that, is that I think it's good to look, especially if you're just starting out and you have no prior experience, it's good to look for those production assistant jobs first, because one of the things just to encourage you is that, like for DreamWorks specifically, DreamWorks is really intent on placing people where they feel like they're going to be the most useful. So they're not going to trap you in a position for like 8 years, right? If you're a production assistant, they bring you into the office regularly and say, hey, so what is it that you're interested in doing? And they try to put you in touch with those people to kind of like figure that, you know, to figure that out. And it's just all they expect from you is to work, you know, be efficient, work hard, learn well, not try to like disrespect your position by leaving too early, but, you know, but also being ambitious with what you want to do. Awesome. With voice recordings, they'll get different reads. Do you usually change the original storyboards if you find something different in the dialogue read that wasn't captured in the storyboards? Totally, yeah. So I mean, kind of like last week when I was doing like the masking or use the pen tool to cut things out, always doing that to just find like, oh man, like this character read this much more sad, but the character has like a smirk on them or something. Find a way to like manipulate the boards. I mean, a lot of times Rad also gave me the ability to just like take a board in. I had a Cintiq in my office and I just like quickly draw a face, put it back in, which I think is kind of technically against the union. But anyway, yeah, definitely like I would try to just like, you know, the thing that sucks about that whole process is like, if they say, oh, the face isn't right, and I don't do anything about it, then we have to wait who knows how long for an artist to like go and update it. If I can just do it right in the room, that's super helpful for them, and we can avoid notes and extra work. So yeah. What's something you wish all directors you worked with knew about editing? This is a really like sort of surface level silly one, but it's just like that I know what you want me to do. You just have to say it once, and then it's just gonna take me some time to do it because it's all because like a lot of times directors are like, okay, I want this. Oh no, but you have to do that. I'm like, okay, just let me like reorganize the clips the way we need to do it, and then we'll watch it. So a lot of times people just like are kind of rushing through things, and that's fine. But do you think you'd ever try to move into becoming a story artist, or do you already love where you're at in the industry? I really love where I am. I mean, I can draw, but I think I would get pretty burnt out. Again, like whenever I would try like drawing or animation in college, I would get burned out on those things after a couple months, and then I'd be like, oh man. Editing, I've never been burnt out on. I really love the process. I think it's really fun. And also in the future, once you're, like once I can become like a lead editor, if that, if and when that happens for like a movie, there's a lot of fun parts of the process where you're working with sound effects people and the composer and you're sitting on records and stuff. And it's really cool. So I'm looking forward to staying in editorial. But if the opportunity ever came up where, I know like Coco, Pixar's Coco was directed by an editor. If I ever had that opportunity, I would love to try my hand at it, but we'll see. Do you usually find like an anchor point in the scene to build based off of the voice recordings or the storyboard so everything culminates to that one moment? That's interesting. I usually go straightforward editing, just start from wherever they gave me, but there are definitely things you have to think about, like, to kind of like hook things up from those big moments. So like right now, what I'm working on, my boss will work on like the big climax scenes, and then he'll pass down information based on that and say like, okay, make sure that we're building up this way to this scene. So typically though, like I just like to get through the story, and then I just like to kind of like take a broad, take sort of like the kind of zoom out and look at everything and watch it and just see how it plays and then go back in and refine. Speaking of union, if we're already on the roster and have a chance to join the union, is it worth joining if we want to get into editorial side of animation, or wait for first gig, or most animation jobs union? Most creative positions are union. Like there's no union for like the production teams or anything like that. But I basically what happened was I was not union. I wanted an editing job. I interviewed. They said you're good, but you have to join the union. And then there was just a process where like the union reached out to me because I think DreamWorks contacted them, and then the union set up. I had to go to a meeting, and then I pay a certain fee, and then I pay union dues quarterly. So, yeah. So there, once you're in the industry, I think it's actually probably harder to join the union if you're not working for a company that requires it than just trying to get it without, sort of representing yourself. So that's the positives. I have DreamWorks representing me. So yeah, guys. I don't want to take up any more time, but we'll have plenty of time for questions next week. And on the last week, we'll just, I want to show some clips that day, but then we'll also do some question and answer time, and I'll just tell you a little bit more, a little bit of advice about getting into the industry. Okay, guys, great. Just work on that, the sound effects this week. Those of you in the homework review, I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend, and thanks for showing up, everybody.
You too. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, awesome, guys. I'm gonna stop the recording.